Beto, he's back in the game and this time shooting for the big job. Amid a crowded field of Democrats, can the former El Paso congressman once again catch fire? Here at home, the Bayou City's bid to host the DNC rejected. Was the fix in for Milwaukee, or was the mayor's destructive battle with firefighters to blame? And across the country, outrage and dozens of arrests as investigators revealed the rich and influential who lied, cheat, and bribed their kids into top universities. Beyond the felony prosecutions, what can be done to block the corruptive force of cash? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off and making a welcome return visit, legendary investigative reporter turned combat media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, Democrat Mike Collier, who drew the votes of 3.8 million Texans in the race for lieutenant governor. In the three spot, 1/3 of the amigos on KSEV, former congressional candidate Ben Strusand. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tamaro Bell. Next up, Republican attorney Jacob Monty. And closing us out on the hot corner, leader of the newly formed Delray Collective, urban Catholic missionary Annie Hickman. Let's do this. Beto is back. The charismatic former El Paso congressman who came within 250,000 votes of dislodging incumbent Texas Senator Ted Cruz announced this week he's running for president. With his unapologetically liberal dogma and high-energy campaign style credited with fueling Democratic sweeps in Harris, Dallas, and Tarrant counties, O'Rourke has been lavished with national media coverage that continued largely unabated after his loss in November. That matters, especially in this very crowded field of declared and undeclared candidates. What also matters is O'Rourke's ability to raise money, a record $79 million in his battle with Cruz. This week, he vowed to raise taxes on some and roll back tax cuts benefiting others.
I think corporations should be asked to pay a greater share into the success of this country. I think the wealthiest at a time of historic income inequality should be asked to pay a greater share. I don't know what the levels should be at, but I know that the tax cuts from nearly 2 years ago of $2 trillion at a time that we had $21 trillion in debt at a moment of extraordinary need across this country was one of the most irresponsible things that the country has ever done.
Question, can he catch fire on a national scale against fellow Democrats, many of whom have matching platforms? Democrat Mike Collier, what do you think of Beto O'Rourke?
Well, I know Beto. We campaigned together. Our paths crossed many times. I like him. I think he's a very sincere person. He's a very genuine person. And he brings a sunny optimism, which I think is really, really needed in American politics. Democrats respond very well to him. The media responds very well to him. I'm glad he's in this race. Okay,
Wayne Dolcefino, I suspect you have a different opinion.
Well, so they call Trump self-absorbed. Give me a break. I think this guy is full of you-know-what. I mean, you can't say crap in the morning, maybe, but I think he is. And I'll tell you something else. I think a guy who dreams in high school about running over little kids in a car is just my kind of sunny guy that I want to hang out with.
Okay, Annie Hickman, as you watch this guy, he got a lot of people excited. He talks about serving the underserved. What's your read?
Yeah, he's fun to watch, and I think he's an authentic guy. I think he's a good guy. I think that, there are a lot of people in this country who are hungry for that, and I think his success, perhaps, in the Senate race was that it was a stark contrast to the most hated man in the Senate. So I think that, unless he finds, a way to kind of drop the cool guy, good guy, and really get some meat in his policies, I really honestly don't think that he has a chance standing up against guys like Biden.
Okay, Ben Strusand, when you hear roll back tax cuts, when you hear lay some new taxes on corporate America, what will that do to the Republicans out there?
Well, first of all, he fits right in with the Democrats. You have 13 now Democrat candidates crawling all over each other to get to the left. Beto has an interview with Vanity Fair, says, hey, I'm a capitalist. You can believe him, you don't believe him, whatever. But he's trying to differentiate himself. Personally, I think he's got a very good chance because Democrats like candidates that are all sizzle and no steak, all hat, no cattle. I'm from Texas.
Okay, Tamaro Bell, you watched this guy during his Senate run. Do you think he can catch on a national basis?
I don't think that he can win. This is just my opinion. If Biden gets in the race, I believe it's going to change. Of course, you know, I told you before, I'm waiting to see who left on the island before I make a decision on who to get behind. But going to what he said about all these Democratic candidates gives me horrors and nightmares and reminiscences of all the candidates that was in the race with Trump. And when all the crabs in the bucket got to crawling, the biggest crab came on top. I don't want that to happen with the party. I want them to get the best candidate, not the one with the most flash in the pan.
Okay, Jacob Monty, you're from the more moderate wing of the Republican Party. When you hear stuff like rollback tax cuts, does that push your crew back towards the Trump folks?
Look, I'd like to see another Texan in the White House. This guy's a dragon slayer. I'm from El Paso. I've known him. Has a lot of crossover appeal, unlike any of the other Democrats. So I would be worried about Beto. This guy can be the next president for sure.
Mike Collier, this field is really crowded. You know, as you've watched politics over time, how does he set himself apart?
Well, I just think by his personality and his campaign style. You know, he has a very unique approach to campaigning. We saw it in Texas. I didn't think that he was going to catch fire like he did. I met him at the very beginning of the campaign, and I thought, well, you're not going to charm a whole state. He did. What I'm looking for, first, two things. I hope that all these Democrats, I hope they stay focused on issues and don't fight each other. That's very important to me. And then ultimately, I want somebody who can go point by point and say, is America better or are we not better as a consequence of the last 4 years, so that voters can make a decision.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears. Meantime, the Lone Star State's other declared presidential candidate was making some news of his own. Former HUD Secretary and San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro says he favors paying reparations to the descendants of slaves. Castro said, and I quote, "If under the Constitution we compensate people because we take their property, why wouldn't you compensate people who actually were property?" Wayne Dolcefino, you want to respond to that?
Look, I'm not sure how we keep track of who we owe money to and who we don't. Here's my bottom line. We have affirmative action. I view that as a form of reparations. I mean, at the end of the day, it's programs that we set up to help people who we think we cheated or mistreated or whatever years ago. And so I think we're never going to work.
Okay, tomorrow, as an African American, what do you think of that? And as a pragmatist, what do you think of that?
Let's back up to the fact that he brought up affirmative action. When you see what happened in the news this week, for those who have money, which has always happened because of the color of the skin before affirmative action, but now even after affirmative action is in effect, people are taking money and they're not knocking out just African Americans, disabled, white, or whatever, because they want their kids in the best school and they have economic advantage and they can find the right doors to get through them. Now, when it comes to reparations, that's not something that I'm absolutely totally. I can't even imagine how they would do it. As part of Alabama, Choctaw, Madison County, Alabama, and I look at how American Indians are still mistreated, as well as African Americans. I want to see how they could possibly do this, because when you look at the fact that the Trump administration said to hell with the heritage of the Dakota pipeline, we're going to go on and get our oil through that any kind of way we can. I couldn't imagine what they would use to justify reparations and how many DNA tests would come up with people who were Anglo all of a sudden African American. I'm just saying.
Man, was Castro just trying to get in the news cycle?
Oh, yeah, it's just part of the crawl to the left I was referencing earlier. There's no way to implement this. And how far back would you go? I mean, we all, if you want to separate us by category, race, religion, we can all have a claim to persecution if we go back far enough. Which, you know, it's not the job of the federal government to go pay people for all the past misdeeds of the world.
Okay, and jump in here, and I want to save a little time for the other guys.
2019, it's not okay to admit that this country was not founded on the stealing of land or on the backs of slaves. We have to start with an admission that there was wrongs done. Is it, paying a check to every single person that was ever wronged in history? Maybe, perhaps. But I think it starts with real dialogue and real conversation and saying, you know, hey, what, my ancestors were wrong in this. Perhaps I was wrong in this. Starting with that, how can we get to real justice if we aren't willing to understand the plight of people, things like that. So I think starting, it needs to go deeper than just paying a check. You got to understand people's stories, and I think that's where real justice starts.
Jacob, that sounds reasonable.
It does. I think we definitely have to discuss our history and not gloss over it. I don't think writing a check is the way to solve this problem, though.
Okay, Mike, close us out on this.
Well, I know Julian Castro as well, and I feel very strongly he's a good guy. I like the fact that he's challenging our thinking in this regard. However, my personal point of view is education is the direction we should take. Education, education, education.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. When we come back, Houston loses its bid to host the 2020 Democratic National Convention. We ask why and whether anyone was to blame. So stay with us. Welcome back. Bad news for the Bayou City broke early last week with the selection of Milwaukee as host of the 2020 Democratic National Convention. Multiple outlets have reported Mayor Sylvester Turner's ongoing slugfest with our city's firefighters likely played some role in the DNC's decision to go elsewhere. The mayor's spokespeople spent the week vigorously challenging those reports, citing other stories which suggested DNC Chairman Tom Perez favored Wisconsin all along. But in a statement following the selection, the DNC chairman said, quote, "We need to fight alongside our brothers and sisters in labor to build a brighter future together and empower the diversity of our party and country," end quote. Some are reading that as a not-so-subtle missive aimed at Houston City Hall. Tomorrow, Bill, what do you think?
Let me tell you something. My father was labor. My father was a steelworkers union. I'm from Gary, Indiana. All of my family. DNC survives on union. This was not just about the firefighter union. Let's make that clear. The selection at the Port of Houston of Rick Campos over the leader of the union who was one of the candidates, that didn't help them at all because that's a big-ass union. Okay. Then you add on top of that the firefighter union. That one was the nail in the coffin, the other was the hammer. It was done. No way is the DNC going to go against labor. And City Hall knows this. They're well aware of this. This has become an atrocity, first off, for any mayor to file a lawsuit against the way the voters voted. That is almost unprecedented in the history of City Hall here in Houston. So it went national. That's why we lost.
Wayne Dolcefino, your thoughts?
Look, Mayor Turner is imploding. Couldn't happen to a more ethically challenged guy. Because I got to tell you what he did to the firefighters, and now the teachers have turned on him. This is a guy who very, very easily could, in a three-man race for mayor, be third. I'm telling you, he is imploding.
Okay, Monty, you're supporting Tony Busby. I guess he was watching this. What's your reading?
Tony has been highlighting the fraud, the waste, and meanwhile, we have this defeat, and the mayor's at the Rockets game. Rome is burning, and the emperor's fiddling. Serious problems. Tony Busby was the first to highlight this.
Oh, God.
Look for Tony to be our mayor.
Look for Bill King to be the mayor. Okay.
More of that later. Mike Collier, as you watch this from Kingwood, and you've been involved in state politics or the state political scene, what's your read on what's going on at City Hall?
Well, with regard to the convention, I'd like to comment on that if I may. I mean, I actually worked on our proposal to try to bring the convention here, and I always felt that Houston was really a stalking horse and we were not in the running. And I'm very proud to announce that we worked hard and we made it very difficult for them to say no to Houston because Houston is such a great city and we came close. However, a convention is pure politics. The decision to take, so it had nothing to do with Milwaukee versus Houston. It's pure politics.
That's right.
And labor is certainly part of it. There's no question about it. Also, the fact that we're generally a red state, of course, some of us are working on that, but the fact that we're generally a red state influenced that decision very much as well.
I don't think so.
Okay, Ben Strusan, what?
Yeah, I'm all for blaming Mayor Turner for everything we can, but they were never going to come to Houston because Texas is not a swing state. Wisconsin is. I think it's that simple.
Okay, Annie, as you watched and read about this, what was going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor it hadn't been looking good for the mayor for a while. And, when you talk about neighbors and neighborhoods, I believe that the mayor should be the best neighbor. And right now, his vindictive attitude towards, labor and unions and firefighters, he's looking like the old man at the end of the block that's really mean.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. All right. Hey, I think I'm going to do the tease now. We're going to talk about flooding when we come back as Harris County grapples with how to spend $2.5 billion in the right way. Stay with us. Welcome back. When and where to spend billions worth of flood protection dollars remained a controversial, I'll get that out, topic this week as Harris County commissioners grappled with the concept of equity. For Judge Lena Hidalgo and others on the court, equity means making sure communities which have rarely or never received projects in the past get extra consideration. But critics fear that amounts to changing the definition of worst first for political purposes. At this week's meeting, Commissioner Rodney Ellis signaled that he's ready to fight.
I'm going to do my part to try to set the tone and hope we don't engage in class warfare. But if we have to, I'm quite capable.
Now, that's not the first time we've heard that term. Here's Judge Hidalgo on Fox 26.
It is not right, nor is it fair, nor is it accurate to create a class warfare around this.
Okay, so what's going on here? I'm going to start with Ben Strusan.
Well, I mean, they started class warfare when she was elected. I mean, I don't think this subject was even at the top of anybody's list. I think most voters who approved the bond issued thought that they would just go fix the problems based on the hydrology of the area and whatever the flood control district, said needed to be done. I am somewhat suspect of the arguments coming out of Rodney Ellis, which lead the public to believe that somehow the Army Corps of Engineers makes flood control project decisions based on income. I don't think those regulations are, I don't think that portrayal is accurate. The water flows from west down to the Gulf. Houston's a big bowl, and they got to put the projects on the west side because that's where the area is, and that's where the reservoirs are.
Tamara Bell actively worked on this, so have your say.
He could be no more wrong, or it's impossible for him to be any more wrong. The federal government that gives out money, not HUD, I'm not talking about housing, I'm talking about for projects for the Corps of Engineers related to flood, those are called best value projects. The government is always going to make sure they get the best value for their dollars. That being said, what they consider best value is the value of the land that they're repairing and the cost that they get back from it. That being said, if you live in a house that's worth $1 million and you have 10 people who live in $100,000 houses, your land is going to get fixed before theirs because that land has more value than they do. That is what they use for this. When I worked on the language and I worked on the voting, equity was critically important. I was a part of the Bayou City Initiative with Attorney Jim Blackburn, and there was people from across the city, across the county who worked on this. Equity was a word we wanted in there because we didn't want this bond to be used in the same way as the federal projects so that those areas would never get addressed. The same way right now for the Rebuild Houston money, for those people to get repairs, it's done on a cost analysis. The streets with the heavier traffic, they're always going to go over those that have the less traffic. So some neighborhoods, as much as you try, your street never going to get fixed. And that's not what we wanted with the bond money.
Okay, Ben, real quick.
The Army Corps, big projects, big reservoirs. They're not going to put a reservoir in Cashmere Gardens.
We're not talking about reservoirs.
Put it on the west side.
We're not talking about that.
Okay. Collier, you live up in Kingwood, and some of those folks are concerned that they may not get ground broken on their projects as soon because of this equity standard. What's your read?
Well, I think the fact that they're fighting over it, once again, shines a light on a problem that we have. And I think at the end of the day, the problem with formulaic solutions is that you fight over the formulas as contrasted to what you ultimately achieve. In other words, I favor a formulaic approach, but then you have to stand back and say, okay, does this achieve a fair result? At the end of the day, all anybody really cares about is a fair result. And often it is not fair.
Okay. Wayne, you're reading.
Well, I think I heard someone say the government tries to spend your money wisely, and I almost fell out of my chair. Look, this hurricane is already such a corrupt process that at the end of the day, it don't matter what flavor people are, what neighborhood they live in. At the end of the day, as long as politicians and their buddies get their fingers in all these disaster pies, at the end of the day, everybody else is going to get cheated.
Okay, Andy, I got about 20 seconds.
Government's got to work for the people, and equity comes from the word equitas, which means fairness. And if we were fair, we would see, again, going back to this admission that there are places in the city that have never been worked on. If this is an opportunity to put some money into those places, I'm all for it.
Mr. Monty, any thoughts?
I think, like Wayne, you take money out and you're going to get a fair result, and that's why, again, Tony's not taking any money.
Oh God! Oh Lord!
Not taking any money, and he's going to be.
Because nobody gonna give him any. He ain't taking none because he ain't being offered none.
I'm sure we're going to talk about that again. When we return, he's fighting to preserve public safety by heading off the layoff of hundreds of Houston firefighters. What will Councilman Dwight Boykins do next? He's in the Watch Your Point hot seat after the break. Welcome back. Deeply committed to maintaining the current level of public safety protection and equally frustrated by the impending layoff of hundreds of firefighters, Councilman Dwight Boykins felt compelled to take drastic action. 11 days ago, deploying his power to tag or delay action, Boykins stalled nearly every item on the council agenda and threatened to do it again if the city proceeds with shedding 10% of its firefighters. Some called it reckless, while others applauded the stand as principled and appropriate. Councilman Dwight Boykins, thanks for taking the hot seat again.
Thank you for having me. First, can I give a shout out to the University of Houston and Prairie View A&M for making it to the tournament. We're excited.
Awesome, man. Hey, you said at the time this mayor and the council are playing politics with public safety. Why did you launch this filibuster, and will you do it again?
Absolutely. I had an opportunity to go out to the academy, Greg, and look at the 68 firefighter cadets that completed all the training, ready to hit a station, telling me that they were taking out payday loans and borrowing money from family members to make ends meet. And when we could just take, the money is in the budget for them, and we could just take the initiative to swear them in, and the mayor chose not to, it was very disappointing.
Okay, with passage of Prop B, the mayor says we don't have the money to get firefighters pay parity with police. Now, and he's saying we can't do it without layoffs. Do you believe he's made a good faith effort to find funding or consider the proposals from other council members?
Well, let's be clear. The voters passed it on November 6th. November 7th, firefighters were obligated to receive their pay going forward, not 6-7 months later. Let me start with that. Number two, it's our job to govern. We were elected to govern. And so what I mean by that, once the voters passed it, what I did is looked in our budget book and found out where we can bring in new revenue sources. And that's why I brought up the proposed garbage fee, which range now from $19 to $24. Every city in the state of Texas pretty much have a garbage fee. And all we're doing is saying bring in some additional revenue to address the voters' will. We did not say jeopardize public safety by laying off firefighters, potential police officers, and 200 to 300 city employees who would lose health care, who would lose retirement, just because we choose not to go to the voters and tell them what we have to do.
Hey, look, you know, you did bring up that fee. How would it work, and why aren't colleagues on council supporting it?
Well, some are, and one of the council members sent out a survey that was incorrect, saying that the money will be used directly to pay for firefighters. That ain't the way it worked. We will place the money in an enterprise zone, and that money will be, that money will be used specifically for what it's collected for, and that's to address solid waste. But then what we will do is look at the general fund budget and move some of that general fund money over to pay the mandate by the voters in the city of Houston. We have to understand, if we start trying to overturn and change the will of voters, we don't have a democracy anymore. And so what I'm trying to do, I'm not saying it's the best answer, but it's the only sustainable fund that will be able to take care of this issue immediately and pay the men and women of the fire department what they deserve, what the voters ask us to do.
Councilman, the mayor says Houston desperately needs more police officers, but can safely reduce the number of firefighters on its force. Now, given the size of our city and our growing population, do you believe that? And more importantly, do you believe the public believes that?
I don't think the public believes. The public turned out almost 2.5 to 1 to pass Prop B. 80%, if not 75 to 80% of the calls will be EMS calls. Those are people on low income that can't afford, Greg, like you and I, to drive to the medical center. They count on their ambulance service to come and protect them. It's important that we make certain we keep that type of system in place. And let's talk about reducing the 400 firefighters. I can assure you the response time from fire department going to save people's lives will go down. And that's not right. It's our job to find solutions. We can find solutions for everything else. When we get to talk about public safety, whether it's police or fire, you will see Councilman Boykin taking a leadership position.
Councilmember, this week Houston lost a competition to host the Democratic National Convention. Do you think the city's ongoing impasse with firefighters played a role with the decision makers?
I don't think it helped. I think as a Democratic convention coming into a city where collective bargaining rights are being challenged, I mean, you can expect our chairman, Mr. Perez, to say, okay, Houston is on board with the values of the Democratic Party.
Okay, you have stated that you are happy and grateful to represent the people of District D. But I have to ask you, are you at least pondering the possibility of leading the entire city with a run for mayor?
Right now, 400 firefighters, 200 city employees, 100 police officers is my #1 concern. 400 firefighters, 200, that's 600 people unemployed, no health insurance because we're playing politics. That's my #1 concern right now.
Okay, but you would ponder it, wouldn't you?
Wherever God leads me, let me be clear about that, and that's the way I operate. But 400 firefighters, 200 city employees, and 100 police officers, that's where my focus is.
Councilmember, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
Good to have you in the hot seat. When we come back, a scandal that's still stunning the nation. Rich folks cheating and bribing to ensure their kids get into some of America's best universities. Should the parents and the perpetrators do serious time? That question and others squarely on the table when we return.
Parents, coaches, and facilitators lied, cheated, and covered up their crimes at the expense of hardworking students.
Hey, welcome back. No event received more attention or sparked more discussion this week than the genuinely shocking college admissions scandal in which wealthy parents from Wall Street to Hollywood collectively shelled out millions of dollars to facilitate cheating on standardized tests and bribes for university athletic coaches, all to ensure their privileged children gained side door entrance to prestigious universities, including Yale, Stanford, USC, and the University of Texas. Unless you were in seclusion, you've heard the bizarre details and the ongoing fallout, careers and reputations ruined amid scads of criminal charges. The scam went undetected for 8 years. I'm going to start with Annie Hickman. When this went down, what went through your mind?
Shocking? No, not at all shocking. I mean, come on. I mean, it was shocking. Aunt Becky, you know, from Full House, like, Aunt Becky, come on, you know, her reputation was ruined, for me at least. No, it's no secret, you know, wealthy, elite, you know, this has been happening for years and it's not shocking at all. No offense to, you know, college and universities, but yeah, I mean, we've been seeing this forever in private institutions of education. I mean, from elementary schools here in the city, you know, to high school, you get this everywhere, right? So I hope that this is a wake-up call to institutions and to those that you know, like, hey, let's tear it down. Let's look at this. Let's look at the real reason some of these people are getting into these schools, where working class, you know, folks like us, middle class, trying to get our kids into this, into these places the right way. Hopefully, this kind of wakes up, you know, an area. So.
Okay, tomorrow maybe shocking was not the right word. Greasing the wheels. Your thoughts?
Look, this is absolutely not shocking. This goes on, as he said, at prestigious private schools, but this happened with UT, okay? These people were allowed to put their students on sports teams that their children could participate. Now, if you come from Yates, or if you come from Madison or something, they're gonna watch you run on that field before you get a football scholarship. They're gonna make sure you can do that before you get in there. There's an African-American young lady in Florida whose SAT score was so high, they said, oh, she must have cheated. She got a lawyer. She had to end up taking the test over again and did just as well because it was like, no way you could do this. I'm not surprised that this happened. I used to be assistant to the dean of Prairie View College of Nursing, and it broke my heart, the students who worked hard and couldn't get in there because they didn't achieve, but they did their best and tried. But there was no money coming in or anything like that. So I cannot say. What I am happy about is that the light has been shown on this, because this is why people want to, you know, when they want to say, oh, you don't need affirmative action, it's fair playing ground. It's not fair to anybody who don't have that kind of bank.
Wayne, you've been digging up corruption for decades, so you weren't surprised.
I was shocked. I think it's absolutely shocking that rich people get away with stuff that poor people can't get away with. But look, we spend so much time in this country fighting about black and white and brown and green and purple and polka dots. You know what? The only color that really makes a difference
is green.
Green, right?
Wow.
That's
Wow.
it.
Okay, Strusan, jump in.
Whoa. I hate going after Dolce Fino, but I do want to challenge this notion, and I saw it in some of the editorials that I read about the actions that you're talking about, that somehow this illegal activity by a bunch of what I view left coast liberals, all right, writing checks and breaking the law, that somehow that justifies affirmative action. I don't think that nothing really justifies what these people did. And affirmative action is a separate debate, a separate argument. We can have that debate later, but I don't see the two, one justifies the other.
Okay, close this out, Mike.
Well, when I think of wealth inequality in our country, I immediately think of education. I think education, particularly public education, should be the great equalizer. And when you look at UT, and I'm most concerned about public schools. We all know that private schools are damaged and the rest, but when public schools, my tax dollars, that should be to equalize and create a level playing field, which it does not. And I hope that they come down hard on these people.
Okay. Good discussion. Up next, Senate Republicans rebel against the president in a vote to derail emergency funding for the border wall, plus the Mueller probe on the verge of completion. More prison time for Donald Trump's former campaign manager. Both topics front and center after the break. Welcome back. The United States Senate voted this week to block President Trump's declaration of a national emergency on the border with Mexico. 12 Republicans joined 47 Democrats in challenging the measure aimed at funding the costly barrier promised by candidate Trump. Friday, the president issued a veto after tweeting, quote, "A vote for the resolution by Republican senators is a vote for Nancy Pelosi, crime, and the open border Democrats," end quote. Despite the significant GOP rebellion, Mr. Trump's veto will almost certainly stand. So what is the take here, Jacob Monty?
12 courageous Republicans that stood up for the Constitution. And this is a Trump-manufactured crisis. There is a surge at the border, but there's not a crisis. And I was happy that Republicans stood up on constitutional principles. And I think more Republicans need to start doing that because this Trump era may fade, and we need to stick with principles, conservative principles, and the Constitution. That has worked well for Republicans in the past.
Okay, Henny, what you read?
From the get-go, fake emergency, fake crisis, right? Immigration, if you look at the Marshall Report, 1980 to 2016, immigration is up 118%. Crime is down 36%. So it looks like immigration is actually helping, okay? On the other hand, you've got white supremacists and nationalists that are creating havoc right now across the world. So what is the crisis for immigration? This is all a joke anyway. I believe that he wanted, to do the veto. I think that he let the Republicans go ahead and do that so that he could have his little ceremony and, sign his big signature on a veto, the first veto of his presidency.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, the head of Customs and Border Enforcement stands up in front of the country and says, we have a crisis, all right? Call it whatever you want. It's a problem. It's a crisis. You don't like the word national emergency. They can't handle the people that are coming over here. They have 50,000 people that represent family units coming in asking for asylum. They release them to the interior because they don't have enough space to hold them. The backlog's over 2 years, and people don't show up for their hearings. You want to know why? Because only 1 in 10 are ever granted asylum status. And those are just the people we know about. There's another group out there that crosses the border illegally that are not asking for asylum. We really have no idea how large this problem is. Now, if the status quo is acceptable to the Democrats, then fine. Why don't you go in front of Congress and ask them to change the laws and just grant everybody permission to come in, and then we'll solve this problem the way you want to do it. But burying your head in the sand and closing your eyes to what's going on is not a solution.
Mike Collier, how do you see this?
There's two distinct issues, and they're completely unrelated. One is what shall we do at the border? And two is who has the decision rights, okay? And so what shall we do with the border? We should secure the border. How do we do it? That's a separate issue from who has the decision rights, and the Constitution is perfectly clear. The Congress has the decision rights, and they've made their decision. Now a president or anyone on this panel or anyone on the street can have a different point of view. That's fine, and they could take their case to Congress, who has the decision rights. That's where it stands, and to overrule that, to overturn it, is unconstitutional.
Wayno, you disagree?
Well, look, I don't get into the constitutional argument. You know, like everyone clings to the Constitution until their ox gets gored, and then all of a sudden they're all freaked out about it. Look, the bottom line is we got to secure the border. I got to tell you something. When the government started giving away candies and nuts to everybody in this country, that's one thing. But to now give it to people who are here illegally is ridiculous. Our prisons, our schools, our hospitals. We're being overwhelmed at a financial cost for people who have no fundamental right to be here. I don't care what flavor they are, where they're from, whether they have polka dots or from Finland. They shouldn't be here unless they can support themselves. Period. End of story.
20 seconds on this topic.
That's the same thing they said when your relatives came here in 1920 and got off the boat. They said the same thing. They shouldn't be here.
Welfare.
So that's the same thing they said. So let me tell you this. So let me explain this to you. This is the deal right here. The border needs to be secured. The Constitution stands. It's amazing that Democrats are defending the Constitution since Republicans said that was their Bible. Okay. So but now Democrats are defending it. They should be security at the border. But as the time it comes to the wall, Mexico is going to pay for it. Are they going to write a check? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Hey, look,
that's verbatim what he's saying. Right, so no, we need security at the border, but you don't override the Congress with your veto power because you don't like the way it went.
Okay. I got to go to another topic. During a week when former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort saw his prison sentence grow by another 6 years, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution calling for a public release of the Mueller investigation findings. The vote was 420-0. However, Republicans led by Senator Lindsey Graham blocked the resolution in the upper chamber. After untold millions have been spent and nearly 2 years of digging, is it high time for the special counsel to play his cards? Wayne.
Boy, that thing is the biggest waste of money. Well, no, it's not the biggest waste of money, but it's just one of the wastes of money. This Russia thing, I said it on this show 2 years ago. Give me a break.
That's why all your friends in jail.
Russians bought some Facebook ads. Oh my God, the world is ending. This has been the biggest, giant, ridiculous waste of time and money, in my view.
That's why his crooked-ass friends gone to jail.
I'm going to go to Collier first.
Okay.
Oh, no, I don't think it's been a waste of money. I think it's essential to protect the integrity of our electoral process. Robert Mueller's a Republican, all right, and he's doing his job, and the things that he's discovering are absolutely shocking.
Okay, Kenny?
34 people indicted, charged, 3 companies. This is not a joke. This is actually, I mean, you smell like a dog, it is a dog. Like, this is bad. It's been crooked since the beginning.
Okay.
And all these indictments could have been handled by the prosecutors in the Justice Department or in New York. This is being not just a waste of time, but a whole narrative that is diminished and demeaned and attempted to bring down the Trump administration because they don't like the fact he beat Clinton. This is all playing election 2016.
Okay, we're splitting time. Go ahead, Monty.
The report should come out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what happened to Lindsey Graham? This guy used to be a hero of mine, and he's turned into the president's water boy.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, that's because the person who held his leash is gone to glory, and that was McCain. Now he's showing the fool that he is. But let's get back to this. When you have this many people going to jail, don't nobody want to go to jail, okay? Nobody wants to go to jail. But when you have these kind of crimes that are being discovered, what is upsetting them is that what they tried to do to Obama didn't succeed. But now, here comes Trump and his trail of fools, and they all just going pop, 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 pop. So they don't like it. So no, don't say there's nothing to this Russian thing, because I promise you, that's not what Flynn, McCain, or Manafort thinks.
But 10 seconds.
Okay, Manafort had nothing to do with Russia. Manafort.
Oh, I know he didn't. No, he just got
Manafort is a crooked white business guy who was put in solitary confinement because what? Who's
to save him from the boys in the hood, probably.
I'm sure we're going to talk about it again. Still ahead, our panel answers the question, what did we miss? So stay with us. President Trump's tweet of the week, we stand in solidarity with New Zealand and that any assistance the USA can give, we stand by ready to help. We love you, New Zealand. Welcome back. something we did not miss was the horrific massacre in New Zealand. As a community victimized by our own mass shooting, we collectively condemn the premeditated violence and the hate which inspired it. Half a world away, a grieving nation will now struggle to find the right path forward. Ahead of that difficult journey, I say Godspeed, New Zealand. And with that, we ask our panel, what did we miss? We start with Annie Hickman.
Cardinal Daniel DiNardo is in the hospital. It looks like he's going to be out for the next 6 weeks or so. I imagine that a lot of it has to do with the heavy load that he's going through in the National Catholic sex clergy abuse scandal. And so our prayers go out to him.
We wish him well. Jacob Monty.
Look, we're not even at the end of March, and this mayor's race is already getting very exciting. Busby's clearly catching wind. Go Busby.
Okay. Tamara Bell.
Yeah, he catching wind, all right. Okay. Bill King for mayor, first off. Also, number 2, thank you for the ride coming here in the new vehicle I got from Allen Helfman Dodge. Promise y'all I'll do that. Now, what did we miss? This is what we missed. I need you all to pay attention to this funding when it comes to this bond money. This was a vote that across the city, Houstonians supported. I hope you all stay involved and make sure this is done the right way. You had the Northeast Side, Maryland, Kingwood, you had so many communities affected. Let's make sure this time nobody is left from off the table instead of being on the menu.
Ben Spruce-Ann.
Yeah, I'm going to have to rethink this decision I made 45 years ago to leave the Boy Scouts because now they're letting girls in.
Wow. Okay. Mike Collier.
Public education. So we're watching the legislature, and they're saying and doing things much differently this time than they did in the past. Those of us that campaign feel very good about that. However, what they're not telling you is that in order to fund public education, as they propose to do, they're going to gut transportation infrastructure. They're playing whack-a-mole with our money, and it's not working well.
Quickly, Wayno.
I just moved back in the city, a block from Braves Bayou. Stop paying off everyone's mothers, cousins, brothers, and fix the bayous, please.
We're going to leave it there. That's all the time we have. Thanks to our team. And remember, keep it right here. Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace is coming up at the top of the hour. He's sitting down with 2020 Democratic hopeful Pete Buttigieg. Okay, thanks, Collier. And be sure and join us next week for the latest edition of What's Your Point? Kind of got ambushed on that.